So a lot of fans are very upset at James Mangold for saying that he does not want to be handcuffed by the Star Wars lore in his Star Wars movie that's supposedly coming up here. We'll see if it gets made. Now, I just made a video going over my theory that the one main reason why all Disney Star Wars has been failing is that the creators are just creating a Star Wars story and not the Star Wars story. And honestly, I couldn't ask for a better example of this theory. So why is it so upsetting to so many people that he doesn't want to be handcuffed by the lore? Well, obviously, a lot of fans feel kind of disrespected because the lore is what we like, but also the lore is essentially Star Wars. Now, it's not exactly uncommon to know that part of this, idea of storytelling and having a world with a, magic system is that you have to abide by that system in all of the stories. Otherwise, it just seems like some story is just going to come out of nowhere and it's going to break the world and the lore and everything and it won't fit. The Acolyte is a great example of that. It just kind of came out of nowhere and tried to literally rewrite everything going on with the Jedi and the Sith, and that just didn't sit right because, well, it just didn't feel like Star Wars then. So I don't really want to get into as much of just complaining from a fan point of view. I want to complain from a filmmaking point of view on what he has said. So I really love filmmaking. I went to school for it. I was a directing student. I ended up learning a ton about screenwriting, and then after school decided I want to study screenwriting more, so I've been doing that, even though that's not what I went to college for, so that was great. But anyway, I really do love Star Wars. I do. And writing for it would just be a dream come true, as I'm sure it would be for a lot of fans, and a lot of fans who especially have an interest in screenwriting. So it's really, really, really frustrating for me when these people come in here and then they just I don't even know. They're disrespectful, we'll say. Also, sorry if my voice sounds off. I've been having so many allergies and I feel like my voice is cracking a bunch. But anyway, why is it that then his statements are bugging me so much? Well, let's consider his statements. One of it is, I'm not that interested in being handcuffed by so much lore. And then him saying, working on interconnected stories is the enemy of storytelling, referring to franchises and stuff. And then also saying you just can't please everyone when you have so much lore to follow. And these are three of the statements. I may be paraphrasing a little bit. I didn't necessarily write down the exact quotes, but these are the ideas. And these are the three big ones that stood out to me, and that stood out to a lot of people. Now, the big one is the I don't want to be handcuffed by the lore thing. And why is that just dumb? Well, it's dumb because, again, the lore is Star Wars. That's kind of the unfortunate thing when you're dealing with a franchise. You don't get to go and create your own world. That's really the issue that a lot of these Star Wars creators have been running into, is that they want to make their own version of a Star Wars. There's a lot of, the Leslie Headland. There's a lot of times when people were complaining, oh, it felt like fan fiction for The Acolyte, and then her talking about fan fiction, and the actress, whatever her name is, Amanda Stenberg, something, I don't know, I'm bad with names, but she was all like, oh, there's fanfic here, and I wonder how much of it made it into the show. And then a lot of it felt like it was just fanfic, and that's because in fanfiction you don't have to follow the rules. You don't have to write it for anyone but yourself. But the problem is, when you're writing it for everyone to see, and this is the story that we're being presented, you do have to work within the story that's already been there. Just thinking about this whole fan fiction angle, it's kind of sad that was it 50 Shades of Grey was a Twilight fan fiction, and that kind of understood the relationship between the original and fan fiction better than a lot of the Star Wars creators now. Seriously, they understood that they needed to, that it was different enough that it could be made into a whole franchise, which should it have been? Probably not. But at the very least, they understood okay, this is a fan fiction, but it's different enough from the original that we're not going to force it to be in the original. We're going to make it its own thing. So why is it that 50 Shades and Twilight is doing this better than Star Wars? Just think on that. So by saying I don't want to work within the lore, or that he feels handcuffed by it, and that's the reason why he wants to set it was it 25,000 years before Phantom Menace or something, which honestly, with how far in advance The Acolyte was supposed to take place, so that way it didn't conflict with the Phantom Menace, and then it didn't actually take place as far in advance, and then it ended up messing up the timeline. Like, I don't trust that. So just saying, oh, we're gonna make it, take place so far ahead of time so that way it won't conflict with the lore, I doubt it. But also, there's still lore there, and you still have to make everything set up so that way it sets up everything that comes later, and it has to abide by the rules. So if he wants to be like, oh, I'm going to show the origin of the Force and the Jedi and stuff, it still has to coincide with everything that has already been pre-established. So, one, he's not going to not be handcuffed by the lore by having it take place so far in advance, but also, that's just part of writing within a franchise. Like, it really is just what that whole job is. And that's what really annoys me, is that I, as a writer, could very easily understand going into it, if I take a job writing for a franchise, I am writing within a story that already exists. I don't get to create an entirely new world. Like, oh gosh, what's his name? Yeah, I wasn't kidding when I said I'm bad with names. Snyder. Whatever his first name is, Snyder, with the Snyder Cuts and stuff. And he had, I think it was Rebel Moon. I could be getting the movies wrong, but I've never seen it, but all I've heard people say is that it was just, oh, he wanted to create a Star Wars, but he wanted to do his own version. And from what I've heard, those movies are not very great, and there is so much slow motion, which is why I don't ever want to watch them, because I hate overusing slow-mo. But I will be honest, Zack Snyder, that was his name, I really respect him for taking what he wanted to do with Star Wars and not doing it with Star Wars. I respect him so much for going and making his own version of it. Did it work out great? Maybe not really, but hey, he tried, he did something, and he understood what he wanted to do wasn't going to fit within the world of Star Wars. So even though he loved Star Wars, at least from my understanding, he just couldn't make it within that world. And so I genuinely respect him so much for not making it a Star Wars movie and making his own thing. If you love Star Wars, but you can't understand you have to work within the story that's already there, don't make a Star Wars movie or show. You are the wrong person for the job then. So why is it so bad to say you don't want to be handcuffed by the lore? Because what you're essentially saying is, I want to ride off of the work and good faith built up by other people and have the audience that other people worked up and gathered, and I want that fund, and I want that brand name, and I want that recognition, and I want the attention on my project, and maybe I do like Star Wars to some extent, but otherwise I just want to make my own original film. And that's fine. Go make an original film. Don't make it within the franchise if you don't like the idea of making a movie within a franchise. Because if you say, I don't want to be handcuffed by the lore, well, too bad. That is the job you sign up for if you sign up to make a movie within a franchise. Once the story is established, that's it. It's established. Even within one script, if you are making an original story, an original full-length movie, once you establish something in the lore of your script, and whatever happens on page 1, that needs to be supported by what happens on page, say, 100. If it conflicts, well, all of a sudden, the story, the world, it just falls apart on itself. So, yeah, recognizing the lore, honoring the lore, and just being like, okay, this is the continuity, this is the story that's being told, you have to recognize that and respect it. Otherwise, you aren't making the Star Wars story. You're just going to be someone making a Star Wars story again. We don't need more of that. That is what has ruined the franchise so far. Now, another thing is him saying, you can't please everyone when you have to follow the lore. And this is just a lazy excuse. Yes, you will never please everyone. That doesn't have anything to do with the lore. It really does not. Like, you can make a completely original thing. Anything you want. Star Wars, at one point, was 100% completely original. There was no other story like it. There was, well, I mean, I guess you could say like, oh, there was the medieval story, the hero's journey thing, but like Star Wars was very unique, and at the time it was the only Star Wars. A New Hope was the only Star Wars. So yeah, even Star Wars at some point was completely original and completely establishing a new magic system, new lore, and all of that for Star Wars. And not everybody liked it. So it's just a lazy excuse. Yes, not everyone is going to like it. Yes, once you get into a franchise, you may have people who want to see something that then they don't get to see in the movies or shows, and then they're a little upset. Sure, so I guess you run into a little bit more of a risk of people having a pre-established notion of what they thought something was going to be, and then if it's not, they can get upset. But at the end of the day, like, if you can make a really good product that works for the franchise, that works for the audience that you are trying to appeal to, you'll be fine. You don't have to use this excuse of you can't please everyone because some people, you know, feel this about the lore, feel that about the lore. Like, it's just, it doesn't make sense. Like, I get it with the Harry Potter books. I'm planning to make a video on that here soon. Maybe that one will be out first, I don't know. But when it came to what people wanted to see in the movies from the books, yeah, I watched the movies first, and I've been going back to the books now, and there are so many things where I've heard people complain so much of, oh, I really thought this would be in the movies, and I wish this had been in the movies, and this would make the movies so much better and maybe equal to the books. And I'm just like, yeah, but when I'm looking back on it, knowing what it takes to write a screenplay, it doesn't make sense to include a lot of the things people wanted, like Hermione and Spew. It's a fun character building thing and a fun world building thing, but at the end of the day, it just really wasn't necessary to add, and it would have taken up so much runtime, slowed things down, changed the pace of the movie, probably ruined the pacing of the movie. So yeah, I see why that was cut. And of course there will be people who will still be like, no, it should have been in, it should have been in, but you know, I'll break that all down in a separate video. Like I said, I'm working on that, but it just was like, yeah, no, there are things that people wanted in the movies that then just really realistically shouldn't have been in the movies and were cut for a very good reason. So yes, I do see that people will sometimes want things for the movie or whatever that shouldn't be in there, and you as the creator can recognize that, okay, yes, there's a reason for this to not be a part of things. But if your reason for not going with the lore that people want is that you just didn't want to, then you can't really use this excuse. You know, I don't know if I'm explaining this very clearly or anything, but it's just like, you know, with, I guess we'll use the Acolyte as an example. Having it be that Ki-Adi-Mundi was there and stuff, like, they ended up trying to gaslight people and being like, oh, fans are just complaining about a birthday of a Jedi that they never even knew the name of before. And it's like, okay, well, if we didn't know the name of him before, why did you include him as an Easter egg that was only going to appeal to people who knew his name? And then two, hey Disney, why in the world did you release a $300 deluxe lightsaber hilt set for Ki-Adi-Mundi after the Acolyte? Like, why make the Easter egg and then do a $300? Like, I'm gonna keep stressing this every single time I think about it. It's $300 for the deluxe Ki-Adi-Mundi lightsaber hilt set that they released after the Acolyte. Or maybe it was in tandem with, I can't remember exactly, but it was around that time when Ki-Adi-Mundi was being talked about because of his, you know, appearance in the Acolyte. And I'm like, Disney, no, you can't tell us that you expected us to recognize him and drop $300 on his lightsaber hilt, and then say, oh, you guys never even knew his name. Either we knew his name and we're willing to spend money on it and see his Easter egg and be like, oh, it's Ki-Adi-Mundi, or we don't know who he is. Pick one, okay? You can't have it both ways. But anyway, sorry for that rant, but you know, and people were like, oh, you know, it's just because of the birthday, and it's like, well, no, other than the fact that you're breaking the world building of he shouldn't have been alive then because his species was short-lived and stuff. Also, everything he experienced from the Acolyte changes the only speaking lines he ever had in the prequels. He should have known, like, okay, a Jedi went rogue, and because of fear and guilt, killed a bunch of people, which, even if that's not formally being a Sith by name, that is being a dark side user, basically, if you're using the Force out of anger and fear. So, it is a Sith by everything but formal title. So why in the world was Ki-Adi-Mundi like, oh no, the Sith have been gone for so long? He should have been like, oh, hang on a second, I've seen this before. I know Jedis can go rogue. This is a rogue Jedi. Let's check with every single person who's ever been a Jedi, check in with everyone, make sure that no one has gone rogue lately, because odds are this is a former Jedi, which didn't necessarily end up being the case, but he should have been having alarm bells going off like crazy. And then when Padme was like, oh, I think Dooku was the one who tried to come after me, he shouldn't have been like, oh, he's, a political idealist and not a murderer. He should have been, oh, he was a former Jedi. And then he was kind of consumed by anger. Again, alarm bells should have been going off for him. So that's really when people are like, okay, you need to uphold the lore, is you need to make sure that, A plus B equals C, and not A plus B, we're zooming all the way to, the alphabet Z, or A plus B equals A, because then all of a sudden we're trying to say that B equals 0, because what came before just doesn't matter, and it's worth nothing, and, it's that kind of a thing, where you only really have to keep up with the lore enough so that way continuity stays in place. That's it. So to say like, oh, you can never keep people happy because of the lore, well, you're never going to make everyone happy, so that's a lame excuse. But then you also only have to keep up with it so much as you just keep up the continuity, which again, that's just part of the job. But even when it came to things that kept up with the lore and stuff, it sometimes didn't make people happy, but that's just kind of part of making art. That just will happen. So then the other thing, which is what really, really annoyed me so much as a writer, is when he had that statement that was saying that working within a franchise and having like interconnected stories is the enemy of storytelling. This is a very common sentiment, and one that I absolutely hate. Also, sorry if you can hear random noises, my cat is scratching on the bed. I hate when people are all like, oh, if you have a story that's connected to another story and it's a franchise, it's the death of storytelling. The MCU's not art, and Star Wars, if you have to tell a story connected to another story, then that's the end of storytelling as we know it. It's not. It's just a form of storytelling. That's it. You can make a career entirely based upon telling one original, not connected to anything else story at a time. That's totally fine. If that's what you want, go for it. There's no problem with that. But if someone wants to tell a bunch of interconnected stories, that's also fine. Maybe the Russo brothers can do it and you're not good at it. That's okay. You don't have to tell interconnected stories. But there is a place for interconnected stories. There are artists who can make them successfully. If that's not you, that's fine, but you don't have to try and discredit that as being the enemy of storytelling. I genuinely, really, really cannot express how much disdain I have for that whole concept and idea. It's honestly incredibly rude to every single artist who has ever wanted to tell a story that connects to another story. Okay, Harry Potter, those were stories that ended up being all connected. Do you hate the story just because they're all connected? Would you take that same approach to, say, not movies, but books? If you have a book series, are you going to say that they're all bad or gross because they're interconnected? No. So why would you say it for movies? Yes, a lot of movies have been turned into franchises that really shouldn't have been. And there's definitely so many examples of movies where the sequel is so much worse than the original, partly because the original really didn't need a sequel. However, there have also been so many movies where the sequel was equal to, if not better, than the original. I really wish I had thought in advance about an example of this. I know there are those out there, and I usually have a list at the ready, but because I am actually needing this information now, I'm not able to think about it. So if you're watching and you have an example, please leave your examples in the comments below, because I am blanking right now, and for some reason I don't feel like stopping and thinking of them and then recording this bit later. Anyway, the whole point I'm trying to make with this is that it is a part of the job that you sign up for. If you sign up to make a Star Wars movie, to make a movie within the world that has already been established. It is not for you to go and make something completely different within the world of Star Wars. You sign up to make the Star Wars story, not a Star Wars story. I get it, it may be frustrating, you may not like it, and at that point, you have to have the self-respect to walk away. Because you know what's going to happen if you don't want to walk away from the big bucks of Star Wars, and you're like, oh, I want to create a Star Wars story, but I want to do my own version, and I don't want to do what, logically makes sense. What you're going to do is you're going to get a lot of attention on what you're doing, but it's not going to be good attention if you end up making something that's completely out there, that doesn't fit, that doesn't belong within the franchise. And Leslie Headland, her career, her reputation at least, it's got to be at an all-time low. Okay, Deborah Chow, I think she's probably good at directing, but considering what happened with Obi-Wan, I'm less likely to want to consider her work. J.J. Abrams, Rian Johnson, same thing. I don't necessarily trust them to ever be a part of a franchise again. I would never want them to make a sequel to something that I made, because even if I made something with the intent of there being sequels, with this being a story that can continue on, I wouldn't want them to do it. Okay, say we're not even doing movies, say we're doing a show where, every so often we change directors or writers or whatever. I wouldn't want these people who have done Star Wars to continue with what I've done, because what Star Wars has shown now is a repeated pattern of disrespecting everything that came before. So you might be able to get a lot of money for a Star Wars project, you might be able to get a lot of eyes on you for a Star Wars project, but if you don't respect the lore, aka the story, what you're going to end up getting is a huge hit to your reputation. So my advice, not that I imagine anyone who's making Star Wars will end up seeing this, but I'm going to put it out there anyway. My advice for anyone who's making anything Star Wars, or really a part of any pre-established story at all, don't approach it selfishly. You are not getting to just create your own little version of the story. You are not going in with a whole bunch of artistic freedom. You are going in with the job of continuing a story that has already begun. That is the job you sign up for. So don't yell at fans if they end up calling you out that you don't end up continuing the story you should have been telling. You're going to have to accept, if you don't follow the story, you are going to take that reputational hit. Honestly, I would love, absolutely love, to be able to continue the Star Wars story, because in all honesty, it's not past redemption. Lucasfilm could save Star Wars if they wanted to, but they're only going to be able to do it if they fill the writer's room with people who know that they are tasked with the job of continuing the story. Thank you so much for watching. If you made it this far, please consider liking, subscribing, and if you have any thoughts on this, please leave your comments below. I guess that's really it for now. Feel free to check out any of my other videos. Like I said, I'll try to be doing that Harry Potter one here soon. Thanks so much for watching.